Welcome to the Rightest Leftist, the podcast for the politically homeless. My name is Nathan Ogilvie, and today we have William, who is a senior forensic psychologist. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit of your background and qualifications?
Sure. So I've been a psychologist now since 2000, so it's 25 years. I previously worked in disability. I studied in England, and I did my undergrad and my master's in psychology in the UK, Sussex University. And then I came to a forensic master's in 2002, 2003 at Melbourne University, which is where I got to be forensic psychology. So yeah, I worked a lot of government jobs, corrections, I worked at police, I've worked in prisons, I worked in psychiatric units, done private stuff, and now I'm in my own private practice.
Yeah, and we should disclose too that you are my supervisor ongoing, and I've learned a lot
Thank you
about
very much.
practice from you. And that's a continuing thing. But the reason I wanted to talk to you today is because I've been doing a little bit of a series on the mental health system, looking at it mostly through sort of a political lens, but because I'm a psychologist as well, and that's my angle, I thought we could have a discussion today about the mental health system and the idea of, I try and come at it from a hopeful and optimistic point of view of how it could be improved. But I think the general feeling from the public, similar to the political system, is that there are large elements of it that are broken. I know that's a very dramatic word, but what would you say in terms of that system being broken? Do you look at it generally like that, or are there specific elements that you see could be improved?
Well, I think any system can constantly be improved because the culture is always changing and the needs are always changing. So all of these, work in progress is true. It is organic in that sense, dynamic. I don't think anything is ever broken because I think it is often just maybe say it's wounded or slightly damaged, but mostly it doesn't meet the needs. And I think the needs perpetually change. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. To bring in a political element is people are trying to get voted back in. And so they're trying to work out what the general public wants. The majority, that's what democracy is. I remember when I was at the police, the chief police at that time had this big talk to us, and he said one of the frustrations he's leading the police is he'll have 1,000 phone calls about why aren't the police stopping from hoons burning rubber up and down my street, as if that's the biggest problem. And so what do I take people off longer term bigger crime, drug dealing, managing mental health people in the community in relation to my 16-year-olds who are doing burning. And the other thing, of course, we said is often the needs are driven by, the front page of the Herald Sun or the front page of the Age. And that makes it very difficult to work out because they're constantly reacting against these sense. So the media does demonstrate or present mental health as either it's a crisis or broken, which is very evocative of themselves, or that we're pandering to people who are abusing it. And I think those extreme thoughts, those extreme statements aren't helpful in the discussions.
Yeah, because it can lose that subtlety of that it's a lot more complex than that. There are some areas, I guess, where it does really well and helps people.
Yeah.
Our work. But also in the parts, but obviously, to get the media aspect of getting headlines and getting attention, and the political aspect of getting votes.
Psychology did a good job today isn't a headline.
All the people that didn't have a breakdown.
Most people didn't commit suicide today.
Yeah, great. So in Australia, I've tried to, I just keep in mind, because we're both the experts, I've tried to learn that my audience is not necessarily experts in mental health, so I'm trying to keep the language as plain as possible. Yeah, but the idea in the Australian mental health system is it is that kind of hybrid of public and private, and also what they call that step care model of the low, moderate, and high needs individuals, and how that it's hard exactly to put people in boxes like that. But the term of the missing middle, which is those people that their mental health needs are too much for being able to manage on their own, but not as extreme where they need to be in psychiatric hospitals, and that is a big area of a lack of funding and services. But do you sort of resonate with that model and utilize that model? Because I know your work is a bit in the forensic, probably more in the higher mood, but is that a good way of thinking about people's needs?
I think absolutely. Absolutely. We know that the vast majority of people can manage themselves and have their own resources and should utilize their own resources because that's what they're good and trained at. And let's face it, a strong family You know, one of the biggest predictors of, say, recovery from trauma is having good social connections.
Yeah.
So if we know that that's better than, say, taking antidepressants
Yeah.
or going into therapy post-treatment, then, you know, that those are the things we should be nurturing from the very start. But so those people are absolutely managing themselves. The high octane, the high needs people who've got organic, you know, schizophrenia, bipolar, often from disenfranchised backgrounds, very few resources. They're going to need that sort of ongoing support forever. But that comes at a risk of making people dependent and reliant on systems that often feel quite medical and shallow and sterile. I think it's a relationship between ensuring the public have appropriate understanding of what is out there in a way that's digestible and understandable, and is educative. But then recognizing that humans have to drive their own car in identifying and addressing stuff for themselves.
Yeah.
How does that change? Well, you have to have looking at your friendships, looking at your relationships, looking at the comfort you have in discussing what's going down. So, for example, I'll say to anyone I've ever worked with, what's your baseline good of physiological, emotional thinking and behavior? And then when that baseline's going up or it's changing, there's an issue there. So if you've got people you're spending time with who can see that, they can pick it up early. And we know the earlier we pick up the symptoms, the more we can rely into that low group, that low need group, that they'll just sort themselves out. What happens is people ignore, repress, avoid, or are embarrassed, or their culture doesn't allow for those conversations. So then they upgrade themselves.
Yeah.
So then they move to the higher order ones due to a variety of features.
Yeah. That's something I feel as a society is improving.
Yes. Yeah.
Mental health literacy, like just understanding what it is, are you okay day and things like that of awareness.
Yeah.
Because I guess, so in those categories, it's something, the stat, I think as you were saying before, it's about 85% of people are in that. Because everyone, it's weird to say no needs because everyone has mental health needs, but the population that are mentally healthy and are not using formal supports.
It's a vast majority of people.
And formal supports being anything that is a service where someone's employed to do it or volunteering or that's the gap between like self-help of just doing that in their community or self-help books or something. And then, but on the other end is that high need. Those people are often hidden in society, I think, as well. If the vast majority of people I assume are watching this are probably in that first category, not realizing how big there is an industry of people in, we don't call it, I don't want to get the language, it's not mental institutions anymore, is it? Because they've kind of shut those down. But it's like psychiatric wards.
Psychiatric wards, psychiatric hospitals.
In-home, like residential care and things like that. There's a whole range of people, and a lot of people don't often see that.
No.
That there's that whole, you work a lot with that on, some of that.
Some of that are mostly with disability and mental health, chronic. I like working with the more chronic needs. I feel that more satisfying.
Yeah.
But I also have a balance of working with less chronic because it also can fatigue. And the risk of only dealing with really, really high problematic and high need people is that it can be quite fatiguing on your sense of success.
Yeah.
Because they're harder and longer to move and the measurements are less tangible. And so as a practitioner, I think you have to keep that balanced.
Yeah, and they may never leave that category. They might always stay in that.
Absolutely. And doesn't mean that that's not success.
Yeah, they can't have a good life in that setting, but they may not be back out in the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The thing is, like, with the media is a good example of that, sort of the sensationalism, because we've just had that case of the guy who shot the two police officers in the state. And I don't think there's anything about his mental health yet, but I wonder about the people who sort of don't really, if they're in that category of not really having struggled with mental health in their life and looking at that and there was the guy, the one in Bondi who stabbed the people at the shopping center. Yeah. The people who kind of slipped through the cracks.
Yep.
Because I think a lot of people who are sort of like pro-freedom or they're kind of skeptical of government don't, I guess they would say that people have the choice to live their own lives how they want. We shouldn't be sort of forcing people to go into those institutions or seek mental health help. But as you're saying, if the person's unaware of it or unwilling to seek help and they're maybe in that high need category, but they're not accepting of that or it's coming out as being violence.
Well, a lot of the families I've dealt with who have got, children with, adult children, I should say,
Yeah.
with significant drug and alcohol issues or psychiatric issues, and the interweaving of them taking too many drugs and then psychiatric, they'll say, why can't we constantly lock them up?
Yeah.
And we don't. The reason we can't lock them up is you can lock someone up who takes drugs, and guess what's happened the second they get unlocked up? They take drugs again. And you feel someone who's psychiatric, and you can lock them up. You can when they're at risk themselves, but they also have the right to what we call the dignity of risk, is to make these poor choices, because we allow people to smoke cigarettes, and that's paying money to kill yourself.
And alcohol too.
And alcohol, and and drive too fast. You have we don't make cars that stop at 110. We make cars that go at 160. So there is a dignity of risk, and there is a freedom that comes from that as well.
I think when it comes to kind of the political messaging, when they take a case, because it's hard to explain that to a family member of someone who was killed by someone like that.
Absolutely.
And they want that justice. And that's the forensic psychology element. I don't want to get too off track, but do you find that sort of, what I kind of noticed, maybe not to, like, again, overgeneralizing isn't probably the best thing to do, that can be the stereotype of mental health issues. And then sometimes people who might, like a guy who's at work and he's really stressed, he might be looking at that going, oh, I'm not that bad, so I don't really need mental health help. You know what I mean? Like, we have these like caricatures of, which is real cases like this guy, if they end up catching him and find out he does have a mental health history, that's one thing, but that seems to sometimes hijack the conversation, those extreme examples.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's extreme behavior, and you can not have mental health issues but have antisocial personality, which would then be a contributing factor to shooting people. Now, was it paranoia, or was it an attitude, a formed personality that everyone who tells me what to do is bad?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's a very difficult thing that has to be done through an assessment, and the nuance of the newspapers doesn't allow for that.
Yeah. And then things like the bail system and that, about how mental health issues can be a mitigating factor, or those social supports. If they have good family, that can be potentially why they might get out earlier and things like that. Or if they show remorse and things like that.
Yeah. But the system is, and the legal system is as flawed as any other, but it's trying to protect people who are innocent, and it is trying to offer support to people who are guilty so they don't do it again. A lot of people don't like that. Beyond reasonable doubt seems very unfair.
Yeah.
But if you were charged with it, you'd probably want it to be beyond reasonable doubt. And if you had been convicted of something, you'd want either rehabilitation or support to not put yourself in that situation again. So I think you said caricatures before. I think there is this idea of demonizing people who I don't like or don't agree with, and then labeling everything they do as a motivationally evil. Yeah. And I think that separates us. It's a great way of separating us.
Yeah.
But then we're nothing like that. Whereas, of course, their own experiences, they're going to have stress, they're going to have anxiety, they probably had poor relationships in their life. Yeah. They've been dumped at some point, they probably had too much to drink. There's very much similarities for us.
Yeah, that they are human at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They've done a horrible thing. You need to have some kind of consequence.
Yep, absolutely.
But locking them away forever, it also just financially and logistically does it. You can't lock up every person forever that's done a crime. You have to.
Well, I mean, the big one to me, because I've obviously worked a lot in sexual offending, is 98% of people who commit sex offences don't get convicted, because it is. It's mostly intrafamilial, as in within family members, dad, granddad, and it's mostly historical. So people in their 30s, 40s, maybe when they have kids, they'll start reporting this stuff because they'll go, oh my God, I was that age when that happened to me, and it'll come back to haunt them, and they'll want to charge some people. So we know that most of those people, it's very hard to prove 30 years or 20 years later that somebody touched you.
Yeah.
So most of them don't get convicted. Right or wrong, they don't. So this idea that you can lock up all the bad people when the vast majority of people don't get locked up is really odd.
Yeah, that people could be committing crimes all the time, every day, and it doesn't get reported.
Yeah, it doesn't even get reported.
Yeah, or it doesn't even get, sometimes even by the victim, identified as a crime.
Absolutely.
So there's all of that too. Look, to frame it in a way, I think what I'm noticing, the political messaging that seems to unite people rather than divide, is talking about community safety.
Yes.
And I haven't yet met a person that doesn't agree that some kind of mental health support for the general community is good for community safety. So what do you think about Australia's system that is kind of that hybrid of public and private? My personal view on it is I think it's good to have a bit of both, where there's a robust public system for people that need that. I think wait times and accessibility is a huge issue for the public. Yeah. And private, I think, has its own issues too, with there's a cap on the sessions. Yeah. Because at the moment in Australia, you get 10 sessions a year. It went up we'll give the Liberal Party credit. It went up to 20 sessions during COVID, and then the Labor Party brought it
down. Yeah.
But what do you think about, do you think we have a decent hybrid system, or we should be lean more one way? Obviously, I think we need to fund it better.
Well,
But,
I mean, it's only, when did it come in? 2006, 2007?
The
mental health. Yeah, mental health.
Oh, I was in high school. So I don't know. And I was not accessing mental health services, so as a high school kid that I probably should have. But my point being, it's relatively new.
It's really, for my, it's new. No one had even considered it. So it was absolutely, and I think by bringing it in, and I think this is the bit that is missed out on, is it normalized it. Then the language became, and often my cousin's a GP, was a GP now, is not anymore. But he said he was so sick of seeing people for physiological fake manifestations of anxiety and depression. He said they're lonely, they're bored, they're tired, they're fatigued, they're upset at the world, and they're coming in with making up physiological stuff so they can justify being.
Yeah.
So he loved it because he'd go to see psychologist, and I think that was right.
Get the support.
He could finally. So I think it did two things. It normalized it. It also took the weight off people who were doctors who were trained to look for physical symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was great. I think that 20. I mean, I think as you said, the high need people who are the chronically mental ill, but there is people who are on a trajectory up to that, who would probably need more, and there's people at the lower end who probably need less. How that's measured, that's a difficult thing, isn't it? People will often come to me, I don't know about for you, and they'll start off by saying, I've got mild anxiety because my own dog was a little bit sick the other day, and it'll end up, they were abused, or they were bullied the whole way through school, or they've been self-harming since they were teenagers, or, 1,000 other factors, which they, number one, wouldn't tell their doctor. And secondly, have led to a complex set of intersections and psychological phenomena, which we now have to deal with in exactly the same as somebody who's literally dog was a bit sick and then had a slight adjustment.
Yeah.
That's the issue, is identifying it. And, talking about not using jargon for this, people who are out of psychology don't get the jargon. And when they do get the jargon, they go, it's so sterile. And why is this diagnosis? I don't want to be called, they have this shame or embarrassment about it. Whereas we use it to simplify complex presentations and symptoms. We don't use it to label people. We use it to guide the effective treatment.
Yeah. To know what we're working with. And even something like ADHD.
Yes.
Medication and therapy together is like the gold standard. So if we don't pick up, and if we don't pick up on that and talk to them about it, I do get the opposite. Like, so my demographic, I work with younger males, younger adults. So not just males, but I find that is, I guess you'd call them Gen Z now.
Okay.
I don't have much of a Gen Z audience. I've got boomers on my audience, but if any Gen Z are watching, they're much more mentally health literate.
Yeah.
So I don't experience that often. They'll come in very open, and often even the GP, the doctor's notes, like the plan that they have to give us is quite detailed.
That's great.
So I'm finding I do work with, I don't say older if you fall in that category, but those guys that come in, often it is a bit that. There'll be like this surface level reason, and it's often stress, and then there's an iceberg of stuff underneath. That I guess maybe that is a generational shift of that. But I also get the opposite of what you're talking about, where some people don't want the label. I often get the other, where it's like, what's wrong with me? And they're really diagnosis focused. And I don't know if that comes, again, it's all kind of generalizing, but social media, I think, and TikTok and Instagram, I don't know if they're the cause of it, but I think that kind of language of like, oh, I'm so OCD, I'm so ADHD. And it's like these little traits that all humans experience.
Exactly. I think it's a double-edged sword. It normalizes these experiences for people so we can talk about it. It can demystify it, but it also then we use the words incorrectly.
Yes.
And we use the words so synonymously with, we would say, well, that's just an adjustment. And they go, no, I'm really sad. I'm really depressed. I'm like, well, you're not. It's an adjustment to this, you've moved house or something like that. No, you don't understand my depression. If like, so the word gets, they're too interchangeable with that and the only concern I've ever had of it, which is why I tend to avoid, we're talking diagnosis with people, is they often either do two things. One, they label the person and make them feel, oh my God, I'll never lose it. I've now got this sort of bloodborne disease. Or they can weaponize, go, well, I've got borderline personality disorder. So if I treat you like shit, that's your problem.
Yeah, as a
rationalization and a minimization of responsibility. It doesn't matter what your diagnosis is. There is a responsibility from you to learn to manage, to identify these factors, and to educate others around how best to work with you when possible, but also to then change your routines and your environment, which are going to be conducive to that change. So if you're going to say I'm depressed, take medication, and then never leave your house again, and do no planning on others and utilize other sports, you're unlikely to get well, however good the antidepressants.
Yeah.
So there is also an understanding of others, and support and caring and compassion that should come in, but the person has to also take some power in that and take some agency to make those changes, because you can't shake somebody into happiness.
Yes. Or not for very long. Like they can come out, because some people do think of therapy as they want to come in and be cheered up and walk out happy. But often I tell people in those first couple of sessions is when you start unpacking this stuff, you're probably going to leave feeling very heavy.
Yeah, you'll be down.
Maybe crying and upset. That doesn't mean it's bad.
No.
Because we're actually dealing with that.
If you want to feel euphoria, take MDMA or heroin. You'll feel.
Did you get that?
But if you want to, so we talk about, do you want to feel symptoms and serotonin and dopamine increasing? There's easy ways to do that, but that is not going to look at the origins of your issues or get you to interact with the world in a more effective way.
Yeah, and that's like related to, because I like to think of it as the system as well, and looking at it in a way of what can actually be done is that I call it, especially because I sometimes work teenagers, I'm doing a bit less now, but the idea of the kid mechanic, where it's like when you drop your car off to get fixed by the mechanic and you pick it up and it's all fixed. Yeah. That's not how therapy works for people, because it's so complicated, and it's the system around them, which can be their friends and family, or the society and the community that they're in. Everyone can be affected by that mental health, but also the other way around is that person, a lot of the time they are quite difficult and unpleasant. Those are probably negative framing, but they're like that for a reason. And it's this kind of whole sort of approach. And I think that's one of the things where with those, I guess they now added, I think you get 2 sessions out of those 10 where you can have friends and family attend, or, with like kids, like parent sessions now. But I think there needs to be more on that systemic level in the mental health system, that the private system, you work with that person one-on-one. It's kind of then up to that person to leave and implement some of those changes. There are, if they're in an abusive relationship, for example, stuff like that.
Well, there's risks, there's environment. But I won't work with children if I can't work with the parents. Yeah. I think personally it's a waste of time. Yeah. Because you can shine them up as much as you want, but they're going back to the same environment. And the parents, as you said, the child's saying it's because of the parents, and the parents are saying it's because of the child. Yeah. And so
it's easier to blame someone else.
Because then you don't have to make any of the responsibility yourself, whereas it's both. Yeah. There is a spikiness to the child as they're often hurt, but they're also in the most vulnerable situation because they have the least amount of power. The parents are often fatigued by seeing this behavior, and they'll have their own grief and shame. And I won't get psychoanalytical, but they've been through similar experiences themselves that is now being revisited in front of their child. But they have to engage in it. Otherwise, part of them not being engaged may be the reason the child's so unhappy anyway, because they're not visible to the parent.
Yeah, and it's not about blame, because I've recently become a parent myself and all that. And it's not about blaming the parents if parents hear this and say, "Oh, so it's all my fault." It's like, no, this is where part of the system is that everyone in a family can be doing something differently. It's absolutely I think you said it earlier on our supervision is like, you would only really see a therapy session as a failure if they come out thinking the same way they came in. Yeah. Part of what we do is encourage them to present different ideas or different ways of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Do you know, I think that's in a negative way, that's where the term shrink came from. It was like, it's like we shrink like we shrink their thoughts and we make them think a certain way? It's like, not what we're actually doing is inviting them to just think about, because a lot of the time they're stuck. Yes. And I like because working in men's mental health is, even if they're quite aggressive and resistant to you, they're still showing up. It's like, what are they showing up for? They probably don't know that the way they're thinking about the situation.
Resistance means they care. If they didn't care, they'd be like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. They'd just agree with you.
Yeah, or they just wouldn't even come.
Or they wouldn't go. Yeah. And they would be very, very passive. I'm more scared of people who agree with me and then come back the same thing and agree with me again and have made no changes, because they're literally saying.
Yeah. I've read a little bit about that. I probably need to look into more, but that is actually almost a form of passive aggression.
Of course it is.
Of just agreeing with the therapist, because it can feed, at its worst, probably it feeds the therapist's ego or that need for them to feel like things are changing, but nothing's actually, they're just saying what you want to hear. Yeah. to satisfy you.
Yeah.
And then they're actually not making changes. Or they know how to fill out the forms to make it look like change is happening.
Yeah. And I find that most often is either they're scared of the change most, or somebody told them they have to go to therapy.
Yes.
And it is to me, one of the key factors is you can't force anyone into therapy. There is no point. They either want to change themselves for the better of their world, or they don't.
Yeah.
Which sounds odd when you work in forensic and people are forced into therapeutic modalities. But within that, in mandated programs, you recognize that and take that face value. You don't take that as face value when you work non-forensic.
Yeah. But even as you're saying, even in forensic, if they have to come and sit there, the change will only come if they want to do it.
Absolutely.
In that setting.
Yeah. And you start to see them, but again, the resistance is normal because, anyone who's ever been in therapy, and, you've been in therapy, I've been in therapy for 14 years now. I'll be resistant. I'm no better than anybody else. I'll have bad days and do nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of the journey.
So the journey.
So is the conclusion then around like the mental health system is that there's always going to be like that portion of people that need help but don't seek it because we're accepting that some people have a level of freedom?
I think the responsibility of the government and the private sector is to make services digestible, understandable, and and culturally safe. And I mean culture, less about different cultures, and more about safe to humans.
Yeah.
And then it is the responsibility of the person to understand how they're engaging in the world, or to recognize it, or to seek reflection from others so that they can do it. So you can't, again, I've just said you can't force people in therapy. So we can't go around with sort of like an ice cream truck of therapy. It's never going to work.
Yeah. And all the people right out of their house.
Can I have some DBT? Yeah. EMDR? Yeah, with the flake.
Yeah, different letters,
Sorry, no jargon.
Yeah. No, but it's because it's interesting, because it's essentially what you're saying, which I agree with, is that the services should be there and robust for when people need them or realize they need them or encouraged into it, that they can be there to be utilized and properly funded.
Yeah. But you also need systems around. We need to get rid of sort of inequality in pay and inequality in gender.
Economic stuff.
We have to do the economic stuff because that's how we know, we need better, more houses, because Maslow said very well, if you haven't got any security, there's no point. You're not going to do therapy with someone under a bridge about depression.
Well, housing is my next series, so I'll leave to that too. Yeah, because you're right.
But those systems are building blocks for well-being.
Yeah.
They can't be independent of each other.
Well, that's one thing I hear. I've got a couple of friends who are police officers, and they talk about that they're dealing on that crisis end of mental health, that we don't really invest properly in early intervention.
No,
it'll
talk about it.
Not just for kids, but if someone is on that lower end and we notice that there's an issue, that's kind of, I guess, are you okay? Just checking in with your mates or family before it gets out of hand, or before it gets to the level of criminality for some people. Is that, like, I hate that. I think defund the police is the worst ways, because we shouldn't defund the police, but we should be funding, I don't say like refund mental health, because that's not like refund, but we should, I think, alongside it. I mean, I think America, some places are trying like a social worker instead of the police.
Yep.
Which I don't think is always good if there is going to be.
Well, they do have PACER teams over here with the police where they have, mental health clinicians who go along with those. And I think that's good. The difficulty is they're often, the police are going into really dangerous streets and environments, and so sending in people who are then caring, compassionate, and they're being threatened.
Yeah, if there's machetes. And,
so you've got this issue where these poor kids or these poor people are in environments that are so dangerous that can we actually reach out to them? Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. So the community safety, I think, needs to be paired with the cost of living crisis. That they're related, and it's hard because I think there's maybe it's not generational, but I notice especially with mothers are starting to come around with this, the whole cancel culture and men and all that. They're starting to see, well, what if this happens to my son? Like, it's easy to say this guy should not be able to have a job because he did this one thing one time. And he should be cancelled. But then they go, oh, but what if my son's accused of something? And they're starting to find with things like poverty is like, you might be very fortunate and lucky in society, have a good job and a house, but other people who aren't, and then they start turning to crime. And it's not justifying, it's just saying they're in poverty, that breeds crime. We need to look at that as a society too. We can't fix the mental health crisis without.
And really, it's funny because everyone says, there's all these sort of, oh, you can't treat the symptoms, you have to treat the person. Well, if you want to treat the person, you've got to treat the environments that the person is to make it. And I agree, you can't treat symptoms without treating the person, but you have to think more widely. And that costs a lot of money, because there are some people who believe, pull your socks up, work very hard and you get what you deserve, which is more the right-leaning area point. And the other side says, no, we have to help everybody. And you judge a culture, how it treats its weak. And I think politically, there's where we stand is, if we go to a left wing, we can use up all the resources and we may be disempowering people and saying that they need to be looked after. And I see that as risky. We go to the other side, that it's all down to, your character and growth, and that's all it is. And if you only deserve it, that puts us down to we're only as valuable as how much money we bring to the community, which is pretty awful as well. So as with everything, I see the whole world in the spectrum. And there is a good bit in the middle. You're always going to have billionaires and you're always going to have poverty. But you really want to concentrate on the things in the middle, and what can we understand about poverty so we can learn to treat people better? And how can we work with billionaires and philanthropists to better share their knowledge and their wisdom and their money and all of the other resources they have, so that we can grow a better society? It sounds almost whimsical and fey when I say it, but that's genuinely how I feel the word should work.
Yeah. How optimistic are you that that's possible in the real world?
Well, we finally had gay marriage.
Yes, true. Yeah.
Women have got the vote. The first country to get women the vote was what? New Zealand. So we've, in 100, 200, 150 years, psychology is only 150 years old anyway. Yeah. So within that period of time, we now accept, we're into the trans arguments now, which is just the gay arguments we had back, or the slavery arguments there 100 years ago. That will move past that as they realize that these are just culture wars. So I'm optimistic that we will grow. We will always find some sort of group of people that we want to get angry about because they're scary. I don't know who that is. Maybe it's people who wear green hats will be in 30 years. I don't know.
I thought maybe.
But, it was rap music, it was cartoons, it was horror comics in the 50s. There's always a social panic because that's what people like. Now it's the internet. And then it will be whatever it is next.
Yeah.
But I think we are growing in the right direction because these conversations are happening. I don't have all the answers, but neither does anyone else. So I'm forever optimistic.
Great. I agree. Maybe on the last point is, you're right about especially when it's like on mental health, you're never going to have a population that's all 100% mentally healthy all the time. It's a part of
bell curve.
Part of being
by definition.
Yeah.
People are that.
Yeah. And I think it's just that my feeling is that there are a lot of people that are missing out on that, or they're being villainized, or they're just not aware. And I think that as a society, we've definitely come, if you look back 150, even 20 years ago, 10 years, if you look at it as progress, it's quite impressive. It's easy to get frustrated in the
now
living today, because it's it could be even better. So that's why I'm trying to get that balance of that tone of because some people I think also say, oh, well, things are good now, we don't need to move on. It's no. Things aren't fully good yet. We can keep working on.
We're definitely going, and we're getting better, and we're more societally minded. But it's, as you said, we've got a place to go. Do you know how they used to treat PTSD before it was PTSD?
Is that the electrodepressive?
Yeah. So that was called shell shock in the First World War. They give you enough electricity, and then they'd send you back out.
And also lobotomies and
things like that. We don't do that anymore. We don't have institutions for disabled people anymore.
Yeah.
There are person-centered treatment for people with mental health. They actively say in the Mental Health Act that they have a choice to engage in their treatment, and disabled people have the dignity of risk to make poor choices. We've come a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm feeling a bit more optimistic after this conversation, because I think it is doing what we do, and even just people, no matter what job you're doing, because I think mental health is one of those things that most people, even customer service, that they're dealing with it without sometimes even know that they have a customer yelling at them, but that could be, if you look at that person who's yelling's life, all the things that are built up to that. That's the thing I'm trying to connect with people is, it's not just psychologists that deal with people's mental health problems every day. It's most people. And it's a society-wide thing that you can get people on board with a lot of other systemic cost of living problems and things like that, when you go, we're all struggling with this in different levels.
Absolutely. And I think, as a person who's been in therapy for a long time and done it, the better you understand yourself, the more you understand your reactions, the less you react.
Yeah.
And the more you can see other people's points of view, you don't agree with, they still could be arseholes, but then do I want to take on somebody's opinion of me if they're an arsehole? Why would I react?
Yeah.
So you can still reduce, you can still manage your own reactions for your well-being and for theirs.
Yeah.
So know thyself.
Yeah. Yeah, great. This has been a great conversation, William. Do you have any, like, I try and always end with a little bit of like practical advice or something too. So let's say we got someone watching this and they're realizing their own mental health struggle.
Yep.
Do you have a bit of a, a brief 30-second or suggestion of what steps people can take just to deal with that if they've just stumbled upon this video and they're thinking about their mental health?
I do, but I have to charge.
Oh, okay.
The base level I would say is, the thing I'd say is learn your base levels and sit down and map your physiological reactions when you're good, when your well-being is good, your emotional reactions when everything's good, your behavioral actions when things are good, and physiological, behavioral, and cognitive in your thinking.
Yeah.
And map those things, and then say, if I was stressed, how would those 4 areas change? What does that look like? And when I see those things, at what point should I take steps?
Yeah.
So if you've got your internal map, and share it with someone you love and you trust, so you can give them permission to go, William, you're being an arsehole. You haven't been out in ages. You're drinking too much. You're arguing with everything I say. You're red in the face, whatever it is, so that you can maybe explore what's going on for yourself. That would be my thing.
Yeah.
Again, know thyself.
Yeah. And I always put links in, the
Yep.
description of that too, so we can have some resources for people that might start thinking about their mental health, and we can make those changes.
Yeah.
Thanks for the interview, William. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Like, comment, subscribe, all those good things, and we'll keep talking soon.